Hey, I'm Daniel. You found my podcast, The Filmcraziest Show, on YouTube. For this conversation, I was able to speak with Edoardo Vitaletti, who wrote and directed the new film, The Last Thing Mary Saw. The film will be premiering today, January 20th, on Shudder. So let's get right into that conversation. Perfect. Nice to meet you.
So nice to
Glad
meet
to
you too.
be chatting with you today about the last thing Mary saw.
Me too. Me too.
Now, I'd love to start with just by asking, can you talk about what inspired the film?
Yeah, it was a couple of different things that kind of happened at the same time. I would say I was doing a lot of reading and research into 19th century art history, especially Northern European, and so a lot of because I think I was taking at the time some classes in art history when I was in college, and I remember just kind of coming across beautiful kind of common visual threads like a lot of funeral scenes or somber kind of empty houses, or especially there's a Danish painter, his name is Hammershoy, who has a great series of paintings about female subjects alone in these 19th century Copenhagen beautiful rooms, and it kind of got me, at least from a visual standpoint, wondering like there's so little happening and yet there is so much. I wonder what these paintings are really about, and it kind of became to it sort of began to create the visual imprint for the house and the costumes and the time period and whatnot. And then on a more personal level, having grown up in a very religious environment, not necessarily strictly when it comes to my family, but my town. I'm from Italy, which is very Catholic country, school, public school, and everything. I just sort of wanted to, I came to wanting to confront like some of the frustrations that I felt against my religious upbringing and this culture of that pretends to be inclusive when it's actually really exclusive. And so it's been like a thing that's been brewing a lot in my growing up, and I wanted to talk about it as it, how that how that type of culture kind of relates to identity and people just being who they are, but not being upset, accepted for who they are. So yeah.
Okay, great. Now, you mentioned just being inspired by paintings. So can you talk about
Yeah.
the location scouting and how you found this house and property that let you tell your story?
Yeah, it was really difficult to find the location because the references were, visually speaking, period appropriate, and we wanted to have to do as little work as possible to create a house. We didn't have the money to build a house on a sound stage, so we needed a location that already had the bones of
Sure.
the story and of the time period. And we looked for it all across New York State. We settled for this location on Long Island. And it was hard because New York State is one of the, everything changed. Everything has been industrialized, and roads where there used to be fields, and houses have been renovated. And it's either people live in them or they turn them into museums. So, and you can't really touch things.
Sure.
So this was kind of a hidden gem that we found. I would say like 3 weeks before shooting, actually. It was very last minute. And it was very stressful for that reason. I think that was the most difficult thing to come up with. Like everything was ready before we knew exactly where the vans were going in the morning for the first day of shooting. So I think 2-3 weeks before the first day we locked it. And
Okay.
it's a great place. It was built in the 1600s. They kept building on it, and it worked very well for the movie.
Awesome. Glad you found it.
Yeah, me too.
Now, can you talk about there's a lot of like natural lighting in the film.
Yeah.
So can you talk about visualizing it that way and also any challenges associated with that?
Well, actually, that was one of the things that made it a little easier. My cinematographer and I, we wanted to the references that we found to come up with the style for the movie. We wanted to make a period piece that made you feel like you were in the period, and so we were looking a lot at these paintings. And what we realized was, the most important thing is that people understand if it is dark and if it is like past 5 p.m., they only have candles. They are going to only be able to see spots of the room and this much from the room. And so we just kind of leaned into the natural light and the candle light. We supplemented it where we had to a little bit, but it made it easier because ultimately, by giving up on the fact that you're not going to be able to see all of the room, you become really purposeful about what you can see. And so
Okay.
all of our shots and frames kind of benefited from that. I think, it never, like, we were never waiting for lighting or camera on set, really, because like I said, if you need a corner, we're going to really focus on the corner and you're going to do it right, as opposed to having to light a whole massive space. So it actually made life easier, and it was very inspiring, and it was much easier for the actors to believe the place that they were in. So it all kind of worked together very nicely.
Okay. Now, we've talked about the visuals, but just in terms of the writing, what was the
Yeah.
research like trying to kind of get that language right for the 1840s?
It was a lot of rabbit holes, beautiful rabbit holes of, like, you're reading a lot of personal journaling, mostly from the time period. There are a lot of, just a lot of people who would write pen to paper, like back in the 1800s, especially actually a lot of women who would do that. And so the actors and I mean, for me, with the writing, I was taking some inspiration from that for the kind of period specific language, a way of phrasing certain things, the formality of it all. And for the actors too, for them to kind of slip into this mindset of, we speak in a way that we use a lot of this or that. It's very quick and everything, but it just had to feel like in tune with the overall restrictiveness of the story and of the atmosphere. So there's a lot of that, a lot of personal journaling, a lot of just kind of higher literature from that time. And then I worked with a great dialect coach who helped me craft this slight kind of period appropriate accent that he and I kind of imagine would have been realistically used at the time for the characters. So yeah.
I was definitely curious if there was if any of the actors had maybe issue with the accent, because
Oh,
or just through
actors
the
love
cadence.
accents. Oh, actors love accents. I mean, my actors at least love accents.
Okay.
If anything, like, because we chose a type of accent for the people who are members of the family, but then for characters like the guard and Eleanor the maid, they had a slightly different one because they are outsider. And for Rory's character, we decided to give him no accent because it just made sense for him to kind of intrude the story and sort of speak like no one else and more modern. But they liked it. I mean, it's just like a great tool, I think. From what they told me, it is a great tool to enter the character. You acting is a physical thing, and the way you speak is very physical. So yeah, it was really fun.
All right. Now I'm just going to my questions here because there's the opening screen text quote by John Calvin that reads, "All events whatsoever are governed by the secret counsel of God." I'm always curious how people find these great quotes. So did you come across that as research? Was that a starting point for the script?
Oh, I was just always been terrified by that quote. That's why, it's something that I came across when I was like a history class in high school. And the whole thing about Calvinism is like the preordained nature of that particular branch of Christianity, meaning, some people are born to go to heaven and some are just born to go to hell. And which also gives all the power away to this God figure that, that they think is essentially, just controlling every move of yours. And growing up, I remember thinking about that quote and being like, holy shit, I don't like it. It was just a very kind of anxiety inducing thought that everything was ultimately controlled. And this image of the secret council, almost like a dark room where like decisions are being made for the whole of humanity, it freaked me out. And it was a big part of why I what went into writing this type of story of these two characters trying to escape their reality, but their reality kind of always being behind the corner and bigger than them. And so, yeah, that was my history professor deserves some credit for that, I suppose.
Okay, special thanks.
Special thanks to my history professor, yes.
Now, can you talk about I love the story, The Old Lady of Bethabara. Can you just
Mm,
talk about kind of creating the mythology for that and also designing the book?
yeah. So that story was a bit of like, it was a riff on a Greek myth, which concerns, I think, goddess Athena, and a prophet whose name is Tiresias. And the story goes that essentially this man whose name is Tiresias, he was just kind of walking through the woods, and he sees the goddess Athena bathing with another. He sees her bathing naked, and then, because he has seen her in a circumstance where she didn't want to be seen, she blinds him, and he becomes a prophet. So I kind of extrapolated a few little bits and pieces from that. So the blinding, because she has seen or done something that she was not supposed to do, and the mythology of the two girls being together in the water. There is a water element that is recurrent. So yeah, just kind of was playing with this idea of, blindness as a form of punishment, which of course has a, great, it's a very, very common thread in Greek mythology too. And yeah, kind of put it in the lens of like pagan Christianity. And for the book, yeah, my production designer made the book, and it's awesome. I think actually it comes from like a bigger book. He carved out a little, like the green sort of like golden wreath part of it, and he just binded it himself, and he drew all the woodcuts that you
Yeah.
see on it. Yeah, he did do that. I think he found some images and then he kind of replicated them, and he has these great like rubber stamps, that like once he puts it all in ink, he stamps them and then he puts them on a piece of paper. So it's a woodcut looking like technique made with
Cool.
rubber. And he also made like all the drawings that were part of the credit sequence that were taken from the book. Yeah, from the style of the book. So yeah,
That's awesome. Who
yeah,
got
he was
to
fantastic.
who got to take that creepy book home?
There were a couple actually, because for reasons of continuity, we had to have a couple different ones, because at some point they got stained with fake blood and whatnot.
Sure.
I think my production designer has one, and I think my cinematographer actually has one right now, because during the pandemic, when we were editing the movie, we shot some inserts to kind of fill in a couple of scenes, and so he was shooting some angles of the book. So I think he still has it. Um, yeah, I should get that back, probably. But
Well, apologize to him for me for making you think of that
yeah,
then.
you just reminded me. Yeah.
Now, I think I have time for one more. So I just have to ask, I saw that your short film was your first short film was set in World War II. So, and then
Yeah.
this one is set in the 1840s. So I'd love to know if there's a time or era that you would love to visit for a film.
Oh boy. Uh, all of them at different times, I think, in my life, sooner or later. I am working on something now, writing wise, that is, I think, somewhere between those two. I think like the turn of the 20th century. I'd love to make something really, really old at some point, like Middle Ages or even before that. It's just kind of fun to fall into like a history rabbit hole, and discover a different time period and the type of lighting and stories where people don't have cell phones.
Sure.
They're awesome. So yeah.
Yeah. Are you interested in anything modern or not so much?
Oh yeah, no, that too for sure.
Okay.
I I've written a few modern things, and that I also like, and at some point hopefully I will make them. But yeah, right now I'm kind of definitely into like the period piece aspect of filmmaking for sure.
Okay, fair enough. Well, Eduardo Vitaletti for The Last
Yeah.
Thing Mary Saw. Thank you for chatting with me on the Film Craziest Show.
Yeah, thank you for chatting with me. Absolutely. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great meeting you.